You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who was a world-class World Cup goalkeeper, if you count FIFA 17 for the PlayStation.
Yes.
And he's also a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Man, I was so good at FIFA soccer. I would just highlight myself as the goalkeeper and then just play for 90 minutes, having exactly 13 seconds of actual playing time. It was so fun.
I never played the video games, soccer games. Would you have scores that were 1-0, and would you just be like, oh, that was the most exciting hour and a half of my life that I just played this video game?
Folks, I'm going to spoil for you the theme of today's episode. The theme of today's episode is Jeff hates soccer.
That's true. That's true. Okay.
When you're playing FIFA games, the scores are frequently more than 1-0. Sometimes they get as high as 2-1.
Ooh, wow. I couldn't even handle that level of excitement. That would just be, woo. All right. We want you to start your week off right with our podcast. So we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips and full episodes on YouTube. Josh, today we are not covering a movie. We're covering the World Cup. I'm so excited to talk about this because in sports, you get a lot of narrative stories.
Yeah.
When you look at sort of the backstories of players, of teams, and these interests in people's lives can really help us to understand story in a fun new way. And there's so much just overcoming obstacles that make it worth talking about, not just from a story standpoint, but a mental health standpoint. So I'm very excited to dive in.
Jeff, that is a really, really good point. And I actually think that the FIFA World Cup gives us an opportunity to talk about that kind of narrative in people's real life sporting lives in a way that some other sports that we Americans consume don't give you in quite the same genuine fashion.
Give me an example. Yeah.
Well, I'm about to watch, and you're gonna love this. I think I'm watching the World Cup, and it's incredible. 48 teams, which I initially thought was going to be way too many, but it was really great. From Cape Verde, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, from all over the world, and there's these stories of overcoming hardship that we Americans don't understand, because when we see like spotlights on athletes, I'm thinking of contrasting this with spotlights of our athletes from the Winter Olympics, for instance. And You've got, they overcame hardship because their parents had to drive them to the hockey rink at 6 a.m. in the morning. And look, I get it. Everybody's story is unique. Everybody's story is different. But when you compare the level of, up close and personal hardships overcome by some of our American athletes in winter sports versus World Cup soccer players, I don't think there's a true level of comparison in terms of the gravity of the conditions that some people still live in our world.
Yeah, and you can obviously, like, there will be individuals who have stories in America that are incredible hardships. You're saying that in the general sense of Americans have it easier than I think a lot of other nations. There are individual Americans who have overcome as much as any other human being. But, in general, it is, we're a much more privileged nation, so we don't have as many refugee stories as there are. I read a story about a mother who left Morocco undocumented and went to Spain, and then one generation later, her son is, I think, the youngest, player in World Cup history. Yep. Those are incredible stories that you don't usually have. I think one of the main reasons, Josh, that they upped it to 48 teams this year was they wanted to get to 60 total goals. And so they just needed more.
You're such an asshole. You're such an asshole. But you are also pointing out one of the topics of today's podcast, which is...
let us know the topics, Josh.
Which is soccer's dissonance with American psychology.
Okay.
And Jeff, you are going to be the American example today about why we haven't traditionally liked soccer. Now, it's definitely changing, and we're going to talk about that too. But the other topic we're going to touch on is the psychological knife's edge of fandom. What's positive psychologically about being a fan of a sports team, and what's the possible drawback and negatives about your intense fandom, how it can really cross a line.
Yeah, I love that. I want to cover just the psychology of team sports and how team sports can really shape the youth. You and I, both played a lot of team sports. I think I learned more in team sports than I did in school. I don't think that that's unfair to say. I learned more about leadership. I learned more about struggle. I learned more about perseverance and grit. I learned all of that through team sports. And I would like to dive into that as well as one of our topics. But Josh, let's get right into it. The World Cup fascinates the world in a way I think that even the Olympics does not.
Agreed. 100% agree. And the numbers bear that out.
Right. Why is that? What is it psychologically? What is it in terms of the game, in terms of the fandom? Why is this so big?
Very easily, and this doesn't really hit a lot on psychology, but very simply, it is the easiest sport to play. The price of entry is so
right.
low.
No. You're talking about the price of entry.
The price of entry is so low. It literally requires a ball or ball-like object.
Right, sure.
And some people who have feet. I mean, that is, but that is a relatively low bar to enter. And then my
friend Kurt Yeager is in the comments right now. I mean, hey,
okay, or a foot
or a
and some
one-footed.
crutch.
I imagine Kurt would actually be really good.
I bet Kurt would be great.
You don't want to connect shins with Kurt's metal leg.
No, you don't. So the price of entry is so incredibly low. A ball or ball-like object and some space, and you've got yourself a soccer game. So that's the first reason. And I think that might be the biggest reason why that sport has captured the world's attention unlike any other. Then we start to talk about being a fan, and that's a little bit different.
I think one of the differences between soccer and, say, the Olympics is, one, the Olympics actually happens every 2 years, not every 4, because we have the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics.
Yep.
To your point, there's so many events.
Yep.
And a lot of them nobody has ever played. I've never luged before. I have played soccer. I think every single person has kicked a soccer ball. And so I just think that we can connect with it in a much different way than just cheering on, our overall Olympic team. It's a lot more consumable. It's a lot more personal. And I want you to talk about that a little, but this kind of gets into story a little bit and why understanding story is so important. In a great story, an individual has one goal. And so as simple as you can make a story, the better it will be. And so there is something amazing about this is our one team. They get a chance every 4 years to compete. And even if I make fun of soccer for being the lowest scoring game in history, I'm still going to tune in because it's so simple. It's just one group of people, men and women, because I'm more captivated by the U.S. women's team than I am the men's team. And it's just one single thing that we can get behind and root for. And I think that that's what's so incredibly powerful. The Olympics is it's too broad. It's too broad. There's too many events. I don't care if Michael Phelps wins a gold medal for the 100 and the 105. There's just too many events in the Olympics to care about compared to something like the World Cup.
I thought you were going to pivot to the obvious joke, Jeff, that every soccer match is its own story because, like every good story, every soccer match only has one goal.
That's funny. That's funny. That's a good joke.
Yeah. No, but Jeff, I think you're absolutely right. As you pointed out, you and I have both kicked soccer balls around. Everybody's done that. We haven't done these other sports. It's even magnified for countries unlike the United States, where there are much, in many cases, much less opportunities to have the breadth of youth sports that we have. So everybody, probably a fewer percentage of people in the United States have kicked a soccer ball around than in other countries. And that captivates people. And then you bring into it that this is my one team, this is their one chance. There is a scarcity of it for
I think
for
the scarcity is
World
important.
Cup.
Yeah.
They actually have talked about making the World Cup every 2 years, because we could do a whole episode on FIFA and the beast that thing is.
Yeah, right.
But the general consensus is if you make this every 2 years, you will diminish the specialness of it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a special event. And full disclosure, my wife worked for one of the organizing committees that put on the games in Seattle. So, I was immersed in the preparation for this for 18 months. I actually felt by the time the World Cup rolled around that I was kind of over it. And then they kicked off the first ball and it was magical. And you could see, these people that I had never even heard of, the Cape Verde goalkeeper, Vojino, became a superstar, global.
Josh, I had never heard of Cape Verde.
Right.
Let alone the goalkeeper. And now I'm like, I'm rooting for Cape Verde.
Right. These teams that you never heard of before, and then you become, a little bit emotionally invested in them.
Yeah.
Not as emotionally invested as their fans who are, all in on their national team. And we are still very much in the era of the nation state. Your allegiance is mostly to your country, and that's what you're going to cheer for.
And that gets to the thing that I think is important is story. We're rooting for Cape Verde because of, where they came from, what they've overcome. It's not often in sports that we're so enthralled with just the way that someone kicks a ball or throws a ball or hits a ball. We want to know the story behind how they got there.
That's right.
We rarely tune in to just see the technical skill involved in playing the sport. We want to know where someone came from. A great example in American football, is just even the one that just comes to mind is who's the quarterback for the Niners right now?
Brock Purdy.
Yeah, so Brock Purdy got drafted the very last player of the draft, which has commonly been known as Mr. Irrelevant, and now he's captaining one of the best teams in football. He's fine. He's a decent player, but the reason we're so captivated, it was because he's Mr. Irrelevant. It's a good story. It's a great story. And you find these things, everywhere. You cannot make me care about curling without telling me the story behind the people that are on the curling team. And that's actually a bad example. I think curling is oddly zen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you wash your mouth out. This curling is amazing. I would watch those rocks just curl on this tiny beads of ice. I don't care who's throwing it.
Yeah. Let's dive into fandom. I want to talk about this because I do think that soccer, again, captures this in a way that I don't know that a lot of sports do. It just, talk to me about fandom. I know you have some things that you want to say, so rather than me try and
Soccer captures this globally for billions of people in the way that no other sport does. Look, there is vast amounts of America who still do not give a shit about the World Cup, and that's totally fine.
Right.
It is not for everybody. We're going to talk in a little bit about why it's still not for everybody in America. There are some psychological reasons for it.
Yeah, it's the 0-0 games. That's what it is. It's not psychological. It's the fact that the games end constantly 0-0.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to posit to you that is a part of it for Americans. It's a big part of it for you because of your small-mindedness and overall dickitude, which is a technical psychiatric term, by the way.
Dickitude? Okay, great. That's in the DSM-5.
Yeah. But my points about fandom don't just extend to soccer. This can extend to anybody who is rabid or even just identifies with their sports team, whether it is, the Michigan Wolverines basketball team or the, University of Arizona football team, who, by the way, is going to play in the Monster Energy Drink Big 12 football season this year.
That's lame.
It's super lame. But sports fandom is everywhere.
Yep.
But every 4 years, about half the planet willingly enters a state of acute emotional deregulation around their soccer team. And we call it the World Cup, but it's also a massive, globally synchronized psychological experiment. We buy the shirts, we paint our faces, we hand over our central nervous system to 22 strangers running around on a patch of grass thousands of miles away. Why do we do this to ourselves? We do this to ourselves because the psychological upside is beautiful. In a world that's increasingly atomized and lonely, sports fandom offers a direct injection of what sociologists call collective effervescence. It's that transcendent electric feeling of being part of something larger than yourself that we're not getting in a lot of places anymore. When your team scores in the 91st minute, you aren't just a spectator for that moment.
For the first time.
For a fleeting second, the boundaries of yourself dissolve. You aren't just hugging a stranger, you're hugging a new friend. You are screaming in perfect, unchoreographed harmony with millions of people you will never meet. And psychologically, it satisfies our deepest evolutionary urge to belong.
Yeah, you made this point when we talked in the Jaws podcast, where sort of the death of the blockbuster and how the blockbuster was important because it was so culturally significant that we have moments we can all indulge in.
Yes.
And so you believe the World Cup kind of gives us that the blockbuster used to.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, again, when we look at the world culture versus kind of the American slice of that world culture, our American experiences of that are fleetingly rare anymore, right? The summer blockbuster, while it still exists, doesn't have the same impact. Television touchstones are basically out. Nobody's watching, the season finale of Seinfeld or the series finale of MASH all together anymore. It's completely disparate. But live sporting events and the World Cup now provides us with instant community, a shared mythology, and even a healthy dose of basking in reflected glory, right? When they win, we win. And our self-esteem gets a free vicarious ride to the top of the podium.
I buy all that. That totally makes sense to me.
But there's a downside.
Sure.
When fandom crosses the line from a fun passion into what psychologists call identity fusion, things get messy. Identity fusion, Jeff, is when the boundary between who am I and that team blurs, and then for some people completely erases. The team's performance becomes a direct metric of your personal worth. And that's when the defense mechanisms kick in and can have some pretty disastrous results.
Okay.
Suddenly, a loss isn't just disappointing, it's an existential threat. We transition from basking in reflected glory to cutting off reflected failure, where we fiercely distance ourselves, or worse, project our shame about somebody else's loss.
Why does that happen?
It happens, Jeff, because of the identification that we have with that team. And it doesn't happen to everyone, by the way.
Right.
It happens to some people who have some vulnerabilities, typically less ego strength, typically, folks who probably have other difficulties psychologically with identity.
Right.
But it can happen with the sports team. It doesn't necessarily happen to that one person it happens to at all points in their life. There have to be some other vulnerabilities that allow their ego strength to be pretty weak in that moment.
I would imagine that somebody's, just flailing to find some sort of self-identity and not really knowing who they are. And they can kind of grab hold of an identity as a Niners fan or as a Patriots fan.
Yes, exactly.
Then when the team loses, I think a lot about, there's a scene from, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's a Jimmy Fallon movie with Reese Witherspoon, where he was a Boston Red Sox fan and he was too much of a fan, and Reese was, trying to think about whether to date him or not. And he, at the end, he's going to sell his season tickets. And the Red Sox had just lost, and he's sitting in a bar with his friends, and they're just miserable. And some of the Red Sox players walk in, and they're not. And they're like, man, why do we care more about this than the players do?
Yeah.
We've clearly got this wrong. That's a great moment. And it's a good example of why does this matter more to you than even the... And obviously, you got guys like Kobe who, if he ever lost a game, even if he won a game and didn't play well, he was going to, beat himself up. But that's a different level. And honestly, Josh, I can't stand when I'm watching press conferences after a game and they've just lost and the guys are so moody. It's just be a professional. Just be a professional. Don't be a moody little bitch. Like, it's your job. It's your job to do the press.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I'm so mad I have to do the press. Then do a different job. You knew that was part of the job before you signed up. You know, like, take a loss like a man.
Your point about that moment when he's like, hey, wait a minute, why do we care about this more than they do? That's a point when that character found some ego strength and started to back away from this, toxic fandom.
Yeah.
But if they don't do that, then this healthy in-group pride can curdle into toxic out-group hostility, where the opponent is no longer just a rival, they're the enemy.
Right.
The referee's no longer a human making a mistake. They're a corrupt saboteur. Even a member of the team itself, if identified as the reason the team lost, becomes a target for anger.
Right, which in the World Cup, there's this story about I think it was Ecuadorian goalkeeper who just didn't save a ball and ended up getting killed.
Yeah, it actually was a Colombian defender,
I'm sorry.
Escobar. No, it's totally fine.
No, I should have gotten that right. There's a massive difference between Ecuador and Colombia.
There was a Colombia. I actually remember this because this happened in the 1994 World Cup, and it was a Colombian defender who scored an own goal against the United States, which at the time was considered the lowest of the low talent teams.
Right.
And he got killed for it.
Yeah.
So that's the real dark side of the tournament. That's the most extreme example. But you also see a spike in domestic violence rates when a national team loses. There's xenophobic vitriol online, and there's just, this pure unadulterated rage. And ultimately, Jeff, the World Cup doesn't actually create those psychological forces.
Right.
It just unmasks them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Like, I think about guys who get in fights after baseball games or basketball games. And it's like, they were looking for a fight. They were an angry person.
Exactly.
Before they went in. So it's not the team's fault that happened. It's that someone, isn't doing a job of regulating their anger. I can't stand fans who yell at other fans. And I've seen it plenty of times, even at a Dodgers game, someone's wearing a different jersey and, they'll have even beer thrown on them. It's like, you're just a garbage person. I hear what you said about the reflection, Josh. Is sometimes a part of it, people enter into a delusional state as well, that they believe that they are part of the team? Does it go that far?
Well, Jeff, it absolutely can. And that's really, really rare. And most all of the time, those folks have other psychological problems that this is just the latest manifestation of it. But it absolutely can. And we've seen that, in some real world examples that have been pretty dramatic, and that people can be stalked, and, people can develop this delusional thought that, hey, I'm actually part of the team, or I'm actually really close friends, or a lover even of one of the athletes. Now, that's not just confined to sports, and those folks have, very deep psychiatric problems. Fortunately, that level of ego blurring is very, very rare.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you a direct question here, Josh, because I think that this is fascinating. I'm not good at getting wrapped up in something. I don't care as much as other people do about, the U.S. being in the World Cup. I've never had a team, I've occasionally I'll lie and say that I'm a Yankees fan just to kind of irritate people. I don't get swept up in these things, but oftentimes when I see bars packed with people, I'm kind of jealous that I can't get wrapped up in it. Is it healthy to allow yourself to get wrapped up in this and to truly care when it really doesn't affect your life all that much whether the U.S. team wins or loses? Is it okay to get wrapped up emotionally in it? Is it healthy? Is it healthy?
Yes, Jeff, I would say that it is healthy. And it is also the key indicator. Folks who can't ever get wrapped up in that have no heart and no soul and are really dead people inside.
Eat all the dicks, Josh. Eat every one of them.
No, but Jeff, I would say that it is a healthy manifestation of our need to belong. Yeah. Let me give you an example. So I actually had the privilege of attending the U.S. versus Belgium game, round of 16 in Seattle.
Oh, nice.
And it was packed with American fans.
Yeah. What was the score of that game, Josh?
Well, Jeff, it was a barn burner. It was actually 4-1. I mean, so it was it was.
It's actually a good game.
It was a track meet.
Yeah. What was the kick to goal ratio? Was it still 2,000 to 1? Was
this would be a funnier series of jokes if it wasn't like America's most disastrous defeat in a long time.
That's sure. Yeah.
But my point is that most of the fans there who were rooting for America were American. A lot of them were not soccer fans. A lot of them, you could just hear conversations around, oh, this is my very first soccer game, and oh, this is great to be part of this. I mean, these are all people who are getting wrapped up in this emotion. And they're also the people who were yelling really loud at the American fans that they had no idea what they were yelling, but you need to do better. I mean, they don't even know how to say it. In fact, one of my points about this game is that this is one of the reasons why the American soccer team's not really going to do well. We don't have a very educated fan base about this. They were screaming at times when an educated fan wouldn't have screamed. Like a player, an American player just happened to find the ball all by himself at midfield, and he turned towards the goal, and there were 5 Belgian defenders between him and the goal, and he turned back around. A very un-American thing to do, by the way, to retreat.
Sure. Yeah.
Turned back around to set up, and he got booed. Right. And I could hear people go, drive the goal, you got a breakaway. No, he doesn't. He's going to get that ball taken immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the memes of guys sitting on the couch eating Cheetos watching somebody do figure skating, and they're like, psh, that was a weak triple axel.
Exactly. This is that writ large for the World Cup, and it's fabulous. It's wonderful. It really did bring people together worldwide. I mean, as much as FIFA is a gloriously corrupt organization, it really does bring the globe together for a month. What I really appreciated were all the memes of foreigners coming in and trying American things for the first time, like going to a Costco or things like that. And
Totally.
And how everybody said, man, Americans are so flippin' nice.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kick in the teeth about geopolitics and whatnot. Like I went to China for 6 months, and I was told China's communist and Chinese people are bad and blah, blah, all this stuff. Man, I have never met a nicer group of people, and yes, they believe some things that I didn't. And it was like, do not question, the government, don't talk about religion. Like there were a number of things that I wasn't supposed to talk about. But I have never met a more welcoming group of people, a more lovely group of people, and I think that most foreigners think that Americans are just gun-toting assholes. And
we're not assholes.
Yeah, exactly. But most of the places that foreigners were coming were the bigger cities, which are a lot more blue. There's a lot more diversity, and so for us, it's like, oh, look at all these fans. Like, hey, this is great. Let's all these fans. I thought that was really special. Even getting on the plane, I just recently traveled, and getting on the plane in Montreal, there were just a ton of fans, wearing different jerseys. And I was like, this is great. I'm so happy that people from other countries are here to celebrate like a game that really doesn't matter. It's cool. It's impressive.
Well, and that is the other thing about sport in general, Jeff, right? Is that on one hand, it doesn't matter. None of these things really matter in the grand scheme of the universe and the grand scheme of human existence, except that they do.
They do. Because it's aspirational for us at any level of any profession to see people excel and be great.
Yes.
I don't think that soccer players are any different than astronauts, in which they've achieved a certain level of skill, a certain level of success, and we like to see that, and it inspires us.
Yes.
Though I'm sure that the sales of soccer balls go up dramatically post World Cup.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
And I think that's incredible. Do you, Josh, think? Obviously, there's nobody else on the podcast. So obviously I was kicking this question to you. This question's for you, Josh. Do you think that there are any other sports that could capture the imagination the way the World Cup does, the way that soccer does? Because God, I'm hoping so, because soccer is so boring. Can baseball get there?
No, baseball can't get there. Look, we really still in this on this planet have a pretty high level of poverty. And so it's that barrier to entry that is always going to give soccer the advantage right now. I mean, basketball has a fairly low
Barrier to entry.
But you still have to have backboards, you still have to have hoops, you actually still have to have a hard ground to bounce the basketball on.
Yeah.
So there's that. I don't think basketball, for whatever reason, is going to probably in our lifetimes capture the, amount of fervor that soccer does. I would like to think, because it is my favorite sport, I would like to think that, gridiron football or American football has that potential. But I don't think it does, because
there's no way.
The barrier to entry is so high with all the equipment that you need to have and the amount of time that you need to have to practice it to get really, really good at it. And I think that probably its time has passed to have any relevance outside of America and, a couple places in Canada.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I was thinking about people will ask, like, oh, if Americans are so athletic, such in great shape, why isn't the soccer team better? And I hate to say it, but the simple answer is soccer gets the rejects of other sports. And we can disagree on that if you want, but our best athletes play basketball and baseball and football. Those are the sports that we go to first. I think that the soccer community comes from basically like the cross country rejects. It's like, oh man, I really don't want to run that far, but I don't mind running, so I'll play soccer. I do think that that's the reason why our soccer team isn't great. We just have a lot of other opportunities to play other sports, and that sucks up the best athletes.
You're absolutely right. There's not even, this has kind of been shown. Our best athletes get sucked up into other sports. I wouldn't say that these are the rejects, but I would say that
the rejects of cross country, Josh, that's the claim I'm making, is that they're so... I'm obviously just trying to troll soccer players right now.
Yeah, no.
I'm hoping that Mark Phillips is listening and just being like, you're no longer my friend, Jeff. Well, shout out to Mark. I love you, Mark.
I know that my buddy Eric Moore is going to end up listening to this, and he's going to be like,
what are these guys going to do, Josh? Kick me to death? Come on, man.
But Jeff, the point of why all our players get sucked up in other sports, I think, is pretty fascinating.
Okay.
Because there's just a disconnect between soccer and the American psychology.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's the nature of the game, right? It is this continuous, flowy game that is low scoring. I will grant you that.
Right.
And you don't have the immediate narrative closure that we have with episodic high-scoring sports, right? Think of basketball. Scores are frequently above 100 for both teams. You go down, you have a few-second possession, and it ends up with a score. And it's a defined, encapsulated moment. That speaks to the American psychology. It speaks more to the rugged individualism and the hyper-specialized roles that we in America have valued throughout our history, and especially in our sporting history, that soccer doesn't really allow for, right? Soccer, soccer's reliant on fluid generalists and spatial randomness and hands-free play, which I also think psychologically is counterintuitive to Americans. We are builders. We do things with our hands. We make stuff. You can't do that in soccer. It feels un-American.
That I believe, but you cannot tell me that the two biggest sports stars in the world aren't soccer players, in Messi and Ronaldo.
I'm not arguing that. I'm saying in America, my friend.
Oh, okay, sure. This
is how it clashes with the American sporting psyche.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that you can have massive stars, in soccer. So I disagree with that part. But I do hear what you're saying in that, Michael Jordan could take the ball on one end and just go shoot at the other. You don't have that in soccer.
You don't.
There's no one-on-one. And some of the points you're making about basketball, I think basketball has gotten ridiculous in how high the scores are. They're playing an 82 game season. You gotta kind of save some energy, so you get a lot of these kind of no defense games, and people are just hucking threes. I much appreciated the game back in the 90s, and I know that makes me sound like an old man. I'm fine with that. I liked a really good 88 to 86 defense fest. Those were better games than scoring 140 to 120. Like, that's insane. That's too many points. There's too much of a good thing there where points just aren't special anymore when you're putting up 140 of them. Like, and I appreciate what American football has done. Because American football is like, there's actually not that many scores per game. Let's just make them a lot of points. Like a 28 to 14 game in football is really just 4-2. It's 4 touchdowns to 2 touchdowns. That's not all that much different than a soccer game, but it certainly feels like it because every score is 7 points, 6 points with a chance for one more. It's like, they really figured out the scoring in football. Like 4-2 is a barn burner. That's a great game in American football.
Yeah, but I will point out that the real difference between American football and soccer is the hyper controlled battle on battle of each play. It's interrupted, it's short, it's violent, very American, as opposed to the fluidness of soccer. I mean, I've watched almost every single game of this World Cup, and there is a hypnotic beauty to the way that soccer players move.
Sure.
I still can't tell you when a buildup is going to result in a goal. I don't think a lot of people can. It's that much randomness. I think that's what really, though, gets at the heart of why soccer is dissonant for America, is that you can watch a game and you can see that one team is clearly superior to the other.
Sure.
And they can lose. And I think that's what really, really hurts Americans to watch this game.
That's fair, but that's also part of the game that I like. It's kind of like the puncher's chance. Like every boxer has a puncher's chance. Even if you're overmatched, you always have, if you have a certain amount of power, then you can just get lucky with one shot and end the match. I like that level of kind of randomness. They say that with football. They say any given Sunday, a team can win. I do think it's a little more rare for upsets in American football than it is soccer.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you're a soccer fan, Jeff.
No. Here's the interesting thing, though, about soccer, and this is what I'll give you. Soccer to me is way too low scoring. I don't really know what's going on. There's a lot of things that, like, I wish that the scoring was higher. But in watching a soccer game, I can't come up with a rule change that would make the game better. I actually think that the game is pretty pure the way that it is. And I do think that there's something to that. Like when I watch football or basketball or even baseball, there are some things where I'm like, this would make the game better. The pitch clock for baseball massively made the game better. They're constantly changing the rules in football to make it more safe, which I think is a good thing. With basketball, who knows what the refs are going to call? It's a really inconsistent game. There's a consistency to soccer and a kind of a perfected game to soccer that I do really appreciate. Tennis is another great example where, like, I just think that the rules are pretty well set in stone. I like the fact that they have, the line cameras to just get calls right. It's a very pure game in that regard. And so I do give soccer credit for being pretty well moderated. I mean, it's a very pure game. Do you agree with that? Is there anything you would do to speed it up, make it more exciting?
I think it would. Yeah, I think you would actually add a tremendous amount of excitement if you had 2 grizzly bears roaming the pitch at all times. You got to tell me you would tune in for that more often. Sure. No, but your actual point is it is a very pure game. In fact, it has one of the smallest rule books in all of sports. It can be controlled by very few rules. I mean, look, FIFA in our modern day has complicated it, and you can talk all you want about how much the VAR or the video assisted, replays have ruined the sport. Which
that was one of the controversies this year.
Yeah, I think there's some points to that. You're getting down to the micrometer in terms of was this person offsides or not. I just think that saps the purity of the game. As
it
you pointed out,
slows down a slow game. I'm okay with it in basketball and especially in football where, like, we need to know if he was in bounds or not. I don't have any problem. Let's get that call right. And we're constantly stopping anyway in football, in American football. So to stop the game of soccer, like I don't know that made the game better. And I think that the players, hated that in the World Cup this year.
So, Jeff, you don't like that they add a mysterious amount of time to the end of each half to make up for the slowness in play?
Look, I don't watch it. I don't watch soccer. I'm never going to watch soccer. I'm fascinated by the storylines. I love the storylines. They're, like soccer has the ability to make me cry in the way that other sports don't. That player who like saw his like little brother in the stands, like those sorts of things just make me cry. There are some amazing stories that come out of the world of soccer. And, a lot of it is because, we're coming from nations who are not third world, because I know that that's an antiquated term, but, just less developed than we are. And there is something really magical about, I don't have much, but I have the soccer ball, and no one can stop me from kicking this ball against the wall or kicking it to myself or juggling this ball, with my feet. There's a purity to that. There's a magic to that.
Well, Jeff, something you brought up early in this episode, and I'd like to circle back to and have you talk a little bit about before I make some observations, is the value of team sports. Right. And the value of team sports to you and in your development as a person. Because I think you and I are very aligned on this. And talk a little bit more about what that has meant to you, and especially what adult lessons it has given you.
Yeah. So I notice this a lot with parenting, where I will talk to parents who will play games with their kids and always let the kid win. And I don't know that that's necessarily healthy, because you'll get to the point where they'll lose for the first time and be really upset about it. When kids compete, especially young, they learn that winning isn't as important as they think it is. It's okay to lose. And I think that learning that early is a good thing, when you're sort of competing against other kids. It doesn't have to be about the win and the loss. It doesn't really have to be about the score. It can be about how you played the game. But the place where I really think that it helped my life is in grit and resolve, because it's the first time where I was really exhausted, wanted to quit, and I had to keep moving forward. And I did so motivated for my fellow teammates. And doing that at 7 years old is incredibly transformative. And it's only in sports that I have done some like astounding physical feats or mental feats. I played an entire half of a game with a separated shoulder because I didn't want to let my team down. Someone just jumped into my arm and popped it out of the joint. And I held on my jersey with my separated shoulder, and then I would catch the ball and grit through, and I sort of loved the grittiness of it. I loved pushing through and challenging myself in ways that like you kind of just can't. And so you learn a lot about sort of your heart through sport in ways you just physically cannot in any other way. Yes, I guess you can like dig deep and study a little more and be tired, but there's just something about digging deep physically. And we do live in a physical world. We're, walking around doing physical things our whole lives. And to just kind of know, hey, I can dig a little deeper is an immense skill that kids can learn at an early age. There's something the Navy SEALs say, which I think is fascinating, but they say that most people only access 40% of their strength. And usually they'll get to like 40% of their capacity and quit, thinking that is their ceiling. And Navy SEALs would be like, no, you can keep going. You can do twice what you just did. And people will. And it's like, you just got your first taste of what you're actually capable of. That is immensely powerful. And it's immensely powerful for children. And then you add on the team component where, you're fighting alongside your fellow man. You want the same things together. You really learn what team means, and you sacrifice for them. They sacrifice for you. And it forms a brotherhood that you cannot get anywhere else. And it helps you become a leader in the business world, in personal relationships, in every aspect. And so I just think team sports are incredibly important for any kid to be involved in.
Well, Jeff, I think you're right. I actually don't have a lot to add because you hit on all the really important psychological themes there. I mean, the ability to see past yourself, the accountability that you have to others in a team sport that is learned young is really important. that's one of the things that got me through very difficult times, like, my psychiatric residency, where you had to really dig deep. But I knew that if I didn't perform, I was letting my teammates down, not to mention my patients. And you're right. I think being in a marriage is, it is a team sport, especially when you have children and you find out that, you have to play man to man or you have to play zone against them, depending on how many you have. It's a big, it's a big deal. I agree with you. Whenever parents ask me, hey, should I enroll my kids in team sports? The answer is yes. And I'll hear, oh, what about like the toxic culture? And what about, win-win-win? I said, navigate it.
Yeah.
And man, because you can experience that. But you can also find like the coach that you believes in your kid and that your kid believes in as well. And
that's another
it's
point,
a transformative experience.
That's another point. Like I learned leadership skills by paying attention to what coaches that I connected with, because you and I both had the screamers.
Yeah.
And then the last coach that I had, his name was Joe Calero, and he was my coach my sophomore year playing basketball. And man, he was just inspiring. He was just inspiring, and he would really talk to you and like get down to like, all right, you're struggling here. Let's figure out why, and then all of a sudden I was motivated to like sit with him and watch tape of like people rebounding so that I can make my rebounding better. And it's like, he built people up instead of tearing people down. And I think about that, when I had assistants, when I was an agent, most of my assistants went on to either become agents at the company or went on to become agents somewhere else because I lifted them up. I made them think that it was possible to be an agent. And every great athlete will tell you, it's actually the coaches who inspire you instead of like grind you that were the biggest influences on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the last point I'll make about it, Josh, in terms of like preparation for the real world. I remember coming out to LA and everybody warning me and warning, my cohort, first year's going to be terrible. First year's going to be awful. You're going to get a job where you're treated like crap. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And they're like, well, you're going to have to get coffee and you're going to have to work long hours, and you're going to possibly sometimes get yelled at. And I was like, can they make me run till I puke?
Right.
And they're like, no. And I was like, then I'm
Right.
good.
But I'm fine.
Then I'm
We're
good. What the hell do I care if I get somebody a cup of coffee?
We're
Ooh,
not
I'm going to
doing
have to
basic
remember a
work.
bunch of orders and, the people are
Yeah.
going to like talk
Yeah.
mean to me. Okay.
We're not doing baseline 21s till I barf. Then I
Yeah,
guess
exactly.
it's fine.
Hey, someone's not yelling at me, you're a pussy, Jones, as I'm running a 17. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
And in my first year of being of being at an agency, I was promoted to agent the fastest that anyone was promoted in the history of that agency. And a lot of it was because they worked me hard and then I worked myself harder. I put in an additional 2 hours at the end of every day, doing research and trying to sign clients. There was many days that I worked from 7 till 10 because I wanted to make it. I'm not saying that people have to do that. There's a lot of pushback, especially by the later generations where it's like, we're getting worked too hard. I agree. I did that on my own because I wanted a certain thing and I was willing to put in that work. But I also didn't just put in work that benefited them. I put in work that benefited me. And there's a massive difference between the two. And knowing the difference is very important.
Sure.
But yeah, I think, sports, get your kids into it sooner rather than later. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the world. You learn a lot about leadership and teamwork.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can get your kids in a variety of team sports, I mean, look, very few people are going to end up making any money playing sports. So the idea that, you need to be in one sport the entire year when you're 8, in my opinion, is folly. I think they need to be in a variety of team sports, each one teaching them different things. But again, that's my opinion. And I know the world has definitely changed from when you and I are growing up. So
I've never told this story in the pod, Josh, so I want to tell it real quick. But this is the story about me being a professional athlete. I was a professional athlete for exactly one game.
Oh my God, this is a great story.
So I lived in China and I was teaching English as a second language. And I noticed that there was these group of teachers that were playing basketball after school. And I didn't speak any Mandarin. They didn't speak any English. But I went out one day and just grabbed the ball and went up and dunked. And I just kind of looked at them and was like, Can we play? And they all kind of looked at each other and were like, okay, I don't know. We don't know what to do with this big guy. And so for a couple weeks, I would play with these guys after school. And I asked my fellow teachers one day, hey, I've never seen those guys around school. What do they teach? And someone said, no, that's a professional basketball team. They just practice here. And so one day they show up with a jersey and a van, and they make me get on the van, and I go play a professional basketball game in an arena with refs, with a crowd. And at the end of it, they paid me a couple $100 and, bought me dinner. And the culture was that the teams would eat together after the games. And so they ate together and they would like look at me and speak a bunch and then raise their cup to me. And I'd be like, yeah. And we would drink together. And it was just awesome. But that was the only time I played a professional game in my whole life.
That is awesome. That is one of my favorite Jeff Jones stories ever.
Yeah. And it just comes from, my ability as a large white, American to just insert myself wherever I want,
Right. Oh my God. Oh, right. See, this is one of the difficulties about this podcast, right? Is we are doing, and you, I think, are about to talk about some people who came from some very, very difficult conditions. Folks, I hope if you're listening, I hope you get how much we make fun of our own privilege, how much of it's an honor, and we just, yeah. Anyways, I don't know that I need to say any more about it. We get that we are characters of ourselves at times. But Jeff, I think you've got some more content for us, right?
Yeah, so you had said you wanted to make a couple other points. Did you want to do that?
No, I think we did it. I'll wrap up at the end, but let's get into your top 5 list, Jeff, that nobody asked for.
So Josh, as I was saying earlier about story and why it's so important to understand story when it comes to sports, we don't connect with someone's skill. We see someone's skill and then we want to know more about the person. And oftentimes their story is what really connects us. So story, I think, is what matters even the most, even in terms of sports. And so I put together what I thought were the 5 most interesting sports stories or World Cup stories, backgrounds of players into a top 5 this week. So this is the top 5 most interesting stories that came out of the World Cup.
Fascinating. Okay, do you have any honorable mentions this week?
I have a dishonorable mention.
Uh-oh.
My dishonorable mention is Donald Trump getting involved with the American player's red card. I hated this so much. And I would have hated this no matter who the president was. There's no need to insert yourself in that. And there's no need to apply political pressure to a game. And so the fact that he reached out to FIFA, which we know is a pretty corrupt organization, and they got that red card overturned, I thought was gross. I was pissed at FIFA for making that decision. It's just another example of, Donald Trump being Donald Trump. It was an interesting story. It's definitely captured my interest, but it is a dishonorable mention in terms of sports stories that came out of the World Cup this year.
Well, will tell you, I think that the person who handled that whole situation the best was probably the player himself, Valerian Balogun. He was like, yeah, this is weird, and I'm just going to try my best. And then afterwards, he's like, I didn't ask for this. It was just the way it happened. I thought he handled it pretty well, but you're right. It was totally distasteful. So,
and to be clear, I would have hated it if Obama had done it.
If
anybody did. Just keep it
wrong.
It's okay for us to be upset about a call we didn't like.
Mm-hmm. That's sports, man.
That is sports. Exactly. That is sports. There's a Captain Jean-Luc Picard quote, Josh.
Sure.
That's you can do everything perfectly and still lose. And that is life. And I think that's spot on. And Captain Jean-Luc Picard is someone that I would absolutely vote for president.
Okay. All right. Great.
All right. So let's get into the real top 5.
All right. You're number 5.
Number 5 is Roberto Pico Lopez. I don't know if you know some of these stories, Josh, but they're absolutely fascinating.
I don't know them all. Yeah.
Okay, so the LinkedIn message that he thought was spam. Lopez was working a regular banking job in Dublin when Cape Verde's national team manager contacted him through LinkedIn. He initially ignored the message because it looked suspicious. 7 years later, the 34-year-old defender helped tiny Cape Verde reach the knockout stage in its first World Cup appearance, and suddenly found himself attracting interest from major clubs. I just love where it came from. Over a LinkedIn message is how they reached out to him. How cool is that?
Wow. I actually had not heard this story. You know what, Jeff? I'm absolutely going to respond to every LinkedIn message asking me for my contact information now. So,
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Your next one.
Okay, number 4. Raul Jimenez finally scored a World Cup goal after nearly dying on the field. So Jimenez suffered a fractured skull in 2020 after a collision during a Premier League match, an injury serious enough to threaten both his career and his life. And after playing in 3 World Cups without scoring, he finally broke through for co-host Mexico and scored a goal. Wow. That to me is just an amazing, amazing story. I could see that as a film. I thought that was pretty great.
Yeah, that's pretty great. And watching the Mexican team this World Cup was incredible. Watching them play in Mexico, these were amazing matches. So great one, Jeff. Okay, number 3.
Yeah. Number 3, Erling Haaland. So this isn't a overcoming anything story. Sometimes stories are character driven.
Yeah, sure.
And wow, this is just such a great character. So he had done well in club football, but Norway hadn't qualified for World Cup since 1998, 2 years before he was born. And he just became an overnight success and adored. And sort of watching him navigate that success was really fascinating. Yeah. He just became this unexpectedly lovable person and led people in chants, posted bizarre filtered selfies, just talked openly about everything, wore a cowboy hat through Texas, was photographed carrying around a stuffed raccoon.
Of course.
Just let his personality shine and was really fun to watch. He just became this really unlikely heartthrob. He became a celebrity and he was worth it. I mean, I was captivated by him. And what makes it even a crazier story is how then Norway was eliminated, because you saw some of his teammates become jealous that he became a star. And there was a moment towards the end of the match where they didn't pass him the ball, and the teammate said in a press conference later, well, we both like to score. And you can tell that Haaland's success and fame affected the team.
Wow, fascinating.
That happens. That happens all the time in sports.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the NBA is legion with stories of superstars who could not coexist on the same team. I mean, it's a very compressed, 5 players on the court at a time. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. All right, number 2, Jeff.
Number 2, you gotta go with Lionel Messi. The epilogue somehow became another climax, a man who just beat back Father Time. Messi entered the tournament at 39, already having completed the perfect career arc by winning in 2022, and instead of taking the ceremonial farewell tour, has led Argentina into another final.
Yeah.
In the semifinal against England, he created both goals and a late comeback without scoring himself, a reminder that his game has evolved from explosive brilliance into almost supernatural control. Yep. He became what he needed to become for his team to win. And soccer is different than, a sport like football. Like watching Tom Brady, play into his 40s. The rules were kind of changed to sort of help quarterbacks never get hurt. So Tom Brady's run is kind of less impressive to me than a soccer player who has to keep up his speed, his agility, his athleticism. For as long as that takes, for a 39-year-old to be able to do that was amazing. And the fact that he changed his game, stories are all about change, and he became who he needed to be, and he put his ego aside in order to be successful. And there they are. They're right back in the championship.
And his story isn't over. We're recording this before the final. I mean, this could just be another amazing chapter in his story. So, okay, Jeff, that's incredible. All right, that was number 2. Number 1.
Yeah, number 1 is a weird one, Josh. So Jaden Adams played through the death of his grandmother and then died days after the tournament.
Yeah.
So this was one of the most devastating stories of the World Cup.
Yeah.
He's a South African midfielder. His grandmother died the day before South Africa faced Czechia. Cha-cha. But Adams remained with the team and helped Bafana reach the knockout stage for the first time. On July 11th, shortly after South Africa's elimination, the 25-year-old's own death was announced. No cause was publicly disclosed. It's a wild story, and I think we're going to hear more about that. I thought that was worthy of the top spot.
Yeah, that's that is wild.
Yeah.
Morbid way to.
Any you think I missed, Josh?
Oh boy!
Like, what were some of your stories from the World Cup this year?
The Cape Verde team was incredible. I mean, a very, very small country, and they qualified for the knockout round. They played some giants, 2 draws. They were incredible. Vagino, their goalkeeper, wasn't playing for a club team. He's old. He's 40. Just, making so many saves was crazy, crazy great. So that's one that I loved. I couldn't take my eyes off Erling Haaland. You nailed that one. This guy kind of looks like Thor. He's like a
dorky Thor.
Dorky Thor. He's a dorky Thor.
Yeah.
What I really like about Haaland is earlier in his career, he had some real missteps. I mean, he just didn't know how to navigate fame, and he's just leaned into it. Like, I'm just a dork. I guess that's just who I am. So I really appreciated that. And then the stories of the teams are stories. I mean, the French team, all of these guys are incredible stories.
Yeah.
One of the things that separates these other, European teams from the American team is that most of these guys, as they were kids, are scooped up as teenagers into the professional world. They have, Manchester United has a U13 team that they pay for. We don't have that in the United States. It's the other way around. We have to pay to play as opposed to being paid to play well into their early adulthood. And that's another big difference in the American soccer culture, and one of the reasons why we continue to get dominated. So, but no, Jeff, I thought your list was fabulous. Thank you for that. Hit on some great stories.
Yeah, I have one more thing I want to talk about, Josh, because I want to talk about Lionel Messi for a second.
Yeah, okay.
And I want to get your opinion on this because there's 2 schools of thought here. So Lionel Messi, 39.
Yep.
He's obviously going to retire at some point. And
Father Time remains undefeated.
I think it's a fascinating question to ask whether a player should retire at their peak or retire when they're kicked out the bottom. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I will say...
And here's the question. Do superstars owe their fans watching them go out on top?
No. I would say absolutely not. Superstars don't... They do... I wouldn't say superstars don't owe their fans anything. Of course they owe their fans stuff. They owe their fans to be, a respectful to their fans, to the people who are ultimately paying their salary. I mean, it is a convoluted route, but if there's no fans for a sport, the sport ceases to become a professional sport. So of course they owe their fans something. Do they owe them to extend their career if they don't want to? 100% not. Do they owe them to go out on top? 100% not. I think it's the character of the person, the personality of the person as to whether or not they want to go out on top. I think we've seen historically a lot of players think they want to go out on top.
100%.
But then when they do, they're like, shit, I miss this fierce.
Yeah.
And they come back. I mean, you saw Tom Brady do this. Of course, he won a Super Bowl after he came back. So there's that. You saw Michael Jordan do this. When he, I'm not going to say it's the first.
Mike Tyson do this at 60.
Yeah, right. And so I think the personality type, speaking in broad strokes here, the personality type that can put oneself through the rigor and the training to get on top. Nobody wants to surrender that willingly.
Here's my thinking on it, Josh, and this is what I think that most people just don't think about, because I think that most people do want to see their favorite athletes go out on top. They don't want to see the descent of someone that they've fallen in love with. Here's the thing, though: for the majority of your life leading up to your professional career, you're playing the game for free. You're getting up at a stupid time and practicing before school. You're putting in all of this time and effort and not getting paid for the first possibly 20 years of your career. And then you finally get paid. And yes, you make some big bucks and whatnot. But you're still playing professionally. You're doing the thing you dreamed about doing. And so if I was in that position, I would absolutely go until, one, I didn't have the heart to do it anymore. and that's part of it. If you're just sapped, then you absolutely retire. But I have no problem watching guys, go out when they're a role player on an NBA team, and finally like I'm getting too injured, blah blah. I don't think anything is owed to retire at the top. I think that like it's so hard to become a professional athlete, and you put so much time and energy, and you do the majority of it not getting paid. That as long as you're getting paid to do it at the highest level, they should do it as long as they possibly can.
Sure.
And if I see Messi in 4 years in another World Cup and he's, just kind of like a role player who's supporting his team, I will say, good on you, man. Good on you. Like stay in the game as long as you can.
Well, I actually have a tremendous amount of respect for those players who were the superstars, who were the top of their game, and then transitioned into a role player to help the team, because that's what they love to do.
I think LeBron is doing that. And I'm not a huge LeBron fan, but the fact that he became the third option this year really spoke to his character. And like, I just want to keep playing. I want to, be around a team that's going to win. And this is the best way for us to do that. I gained a ton of respect for LeBron this year.
Jeff, I agree with you. Another one that comes to mind for me, an older throwback, is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, he was not the top superstar on those Lakers Showtimes teams. It was Magic Johnson, where he had been the superstar, the top draw from his days in middle school. And then it was Magic Johnson, and he was like, I'm going to grind it. I'm going to grind it and get my rings and do this because I love to do this. So I think we're aligned here.
Okay, Josh, that's all I had. Any last points you want to make before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, I think the main thrust of our podcast today is really about fandom and the psychological aspects of sports. And I just want to encourage people, lean into your fandom. This is fun, right? Being a part of your team is fun. Know that you're not an actual part of the team. And if you keep that in mind, then the rest of the stuff is enjoyable. It's fun. If you get upset when your team loses, I mean, that's okay to an extent.
Right.
Everything in life, moderation. If you do find that you're getting a little bit too invested in these teams, then it's time to step back. It may or may not be time to get some professional counseling at that point. So like, hey, do I have some ego issues here, strength issues that I need to shore up? It may be that that's kind of the canary in the coal mine for you to look at some other parts of your life where having some counseling around ego strength might benefit you in other areas as well.
Well, and let me get specific on that, Josh, because I learned this from you. I think it's important to reiterate as many times as we can. How do you know if it's gone too far?
Well, Jeff,
go ahead. The way that you know is if it's negatively impacting one or more spheres of your life.
Boom.
That's the answer. And
Jeff,
I
you were
love
a
that
junior psychiatrist.
It's okay to be heartbroken if your team loses.
Yeah.
Just don't let it negatively impact your life.
For like a day.
Exactly. And if you want to oh man, that was a hard fight. I'm gonna have an extra beer tonight. That's fine. But yeah, if it's negatively impacting your personal life, your professional life, then it might be time to get some help.
Well, Jeff, this was a super enjoyable episode talking about, popular culture part of the world and psychological impact here. So I say good job to you, sir. What a great team we are.
Yeah. Okay, thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of the World Cup. Cinemental is produced by me, Jeff Jones, and edited by David Haverty. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. You can find Dr. Jones on AOL or by following him on Reddit. This has been a Large and in Charge production in association with PMC Media. For Dr. Josh Jones, I'm Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.